could hear a marriage end. Not with shouting, not with a confession. With the soft, precise click of a new lock turning in a door that had always been mine. I noticed something was wrong before I noticed the lock. That's the part people don't understand. They think betrayal announces itself. Lipstick on a collar, a phone left face down, a name said wrong in bed. No. It announces itself in absences, in delays, in the way a man stops asking where you've been because he's already decided you no longer matter. My husband, Daniel, had started arriving home exactly 20 minutes later than usual. Not 30, not an hour, 20. Too neat to be traffic, too consistent to be coincidence. I noticed because I'm observant. Because you have to be when you've spent years learning the weather of someone else's moods. Because marriage trained me to read silence the way sailors read clouds. He would come in, loosen his tie, kiss my cheek without looking at my face, and head straight for the shower. Same pattern, same sequence, like he was rinsing something off before stepping back into our life. I didn't accuse him. I didn't cry. I didn't snoop. Not yet. I waited. That evening, I stood at the kitchen counter chopping onions we would not eat together. The clock above the stove read 6:40 p.m. He should have been home at 6:20. At 6:41, my phone buzzed. Running late. Don't wait up. 4 words. No apology, no explanation. I turned off the stove. Something in my chest went quiet. Not calm, not peace. The sound a room makes when all the air has been pulled out. He came home at 7:02. I know because I was sitting on the couch, lights off, fully dressed, listening. The door opened, closed, keys placed carefully in the bowl by the door, shoes lined up. He thought if he moved softly enough, I wouldn't exist. "Daniel," I said into the dark. He froze. Then he sighed. That tired, theatrical sigh he used when he wanted to sound burdened instead of guilty. "You scared me," he said, flipping on the lamp. I didn't respond. I looked at his face, at the faint flush in his cheeks, at the way his eyes slid past mine instead of landing. "Where were you?" I asked. He smiled. A polite smile. A managerial smile. The one he used with interns and servers and women he didn't take seriously. "Work," he said. I stood. "You smell like soap," I said. "Not ours." That did it. Just a flicker, a tightening at the corner of his mouth. "You're imagining things," he replied. "You've been tense lately." There it was. The pivot, the reversal. Not "I'm sorry," not "let me explain." Just the suggestion that my perception was the problem. I nodded. Slowly. That was my mistake. He took it as surrender. "Go to bed," he added gently. "We'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow. The most dangerous word in a marriage. It promises resolution and delivers erosion. I didn't go to bed. I waited until he did. Until his breathing deepened and evened out. Until the man beside me became just a body again. Then I got up. I didn't look at his phone. I didn't need to. I opened his laptop. There it was. Not hidden, just underestimated. A calendar entry. 7 to 8. L, no last name, no context, just a letter. I closed the laptop. I didn't cry. Not then. I slept for exactly 3 hours. At 5:30 a.m., I got up, showered, dressed, and made coffee. The same way I had for 12 years. Daniel came into the kitchen at 6:10, towel around his waist, hair damp. "You're up early," he said. "So are you," I replied. He paused, studied me. He could tell something had shifted. Men always can. They just misidentify what it means. "I have a meeting," he said. "I might be late tonight too." "Of course," I answered. "Take your time." He smiled again. Relief. He leaned down to kiss my forehead. I stepped back. That was the first crack. He didn't comment on it, but he noticed. I left the house at 7:15, drove aimlessly for a while, parked, sat, thought. I asked myself a simple question. If I were wrong, what would he do to reassure me? The answer came quickly. Nothing. By noon, I had decided not to confront him. Not yet. I wanted to see how far he'd already gone. Men tell the truth with their logistics. At 4:30 p.m., I came home. The front door didn't open. I tried again. Nothing. For a moment, I honestly thought I had the wrong house. That's how disorienting betrayal is. It makes you doubt geography. Then I noticed it. The lock. New. Polished. Clean. A lock I had never touched, never turned, never authorized. My key didn't fit. I stood there, grocery bags slipping from my hand, oranges rolling onto the porch like punctuation marks. I rang the bell. No answer. I knocked. Harder. Finally, my phone buzzed. We need to talk. Not here. I laughed. Out loud. A short, sharp sound that surprised me. Open the door, I said when he answered. Now. Silence on the line. Then, she's inside. There it was. The truth. Delivered without ceremony. You changed the locks, I said, on our house. I needed space, he replied. You've been intense. I looked at the door, at the life behind it, at the audacity. For how long? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. Just tonight, he said. Go stay with a friend. We'll figure things out. I checked my watch. 4:42 p.m. Daniel, I said quietly, you have 20 minutes. For what? He asked. To decide who you think I am. He scoffed. I could hear it. You're being dramatic. 20 minutes, I repeated, then everything changes. I hung up. I didn't beg. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't sit on the steps and wait. I went to my car. Those 20 minutes were the longest and shortest of my life. I drove to the bank first, closed the joint account, froze the rest. I drove to my sister's law firm, asked for one favor and offered one truth. I drove back to the house and parked across the street. At 5:02 p.m., the front door opened. She stepped out. You always know. Even without a face. Even without a name. She wore my sweater. Daniel followed her, carrying a bag like this was temporary. Like this was reasonable. He saw my car. His face drained. I got out slowly, deliberately. Emily, he started. I raised a hand. No, I said. You don't get dialogue anymore. She looked between us, nervous, young, certain she'd won something. Take it, I said to her, gesturing to the house. All of it. The locks, the lies, the version of him that thinks women are replaceable. Daniel stepped forward. You can't just... I already did, I replied. 20 minutes ago. I turned back to my car. Behind me, something shattered. Not glass, not words, certainty. I drove away without looking in the mirror. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew one thing. This was not the moment I lost my marriage. This was the moment he lost control of the story. I didn't go to my sister's house. That would have been tidy, predictable. A woman displaced returning to blood and comfort. I wasn't ready to be comforted. I was ready to be accurate. I drove until the city thinned out and the streets lost their names. I parked under a flickering streetlight behind a closed grocery store and turned off the engine. Silence pressed in. That was when my hands started shaking. Not hysterical, not cinematic, just a quiet tremor, like my body was finally catching up to what my mind had already accepted. I sat there and took inventory. Phone, wallet, car, a lifetime reduced to what fit in arm's reach. I checked my messages, 12 missed calls, all from Daniel. No apology, no explanation, just escalation. Please don't do this. You're overreacting. We need to talk like adults. I deleted them without listening. Adults don't change locks. Adults don't dress their mistresses in their wife's clothes and call it space. I drove to a hotel on the edge of town, the kind business travelers use when they don't plan on being remembered. I checked in under my own name and asked for a room on a high floor. Not for safety, for perspective. Inside, I sat on the bed fully dressed and stared at the wall. This was the moment people imagine you collapse. I didn't. I thought about the locks. He hadn't changed them in panic. Panic is sloppy. He'd planned it, scheduled it, likely paid extra for the rush. That meant there was a version of him, quiet, methodical, who had already decided I was expendable. You don't come back from that. At 9:17 p.m., my phone rang again. This time I answered. Emily, he said immediately, voice tight. Where are you? I smiled. He couldn't see it, but he could hear the calm. Not locked out, I said. This isn't funny. It's not meant to be. He exhaled sharply. She's gone. That was his offer. Remove the witness. Restore the illusion. I don't care, I replied. You should, he snapped. This is our life you're throwing away. No, I corrected him. This is your life. I just stopped propping it up. There was a pause. Then anger. Real anger. You think you're better than me? He asked. After everything I've done for you? There it was. The ledger. Men like Daniel always keep one. You didn't do things for me, I said evenly. You did them to me, so I'd stay manageable. That's not fair. Neither is locking your wife out of her own house for your mistress, I replied. Yet here we are. Silence stretched. You'll regret this, he said finally. You don't know how hard I made your life easy. I ended the call. I slept that night. Deeply. That surprised me. The next morning, I woke without panic. Just clarity. I showered, dressed, and stood in front of the mirror. I looked older. Not from the night. From the truth. At 10:03 a.m., I walked into my sister's office. She didn't hug me. She looked at my face first. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. Tell me exactly what happened. So I did. Without drama, without excuses. She listened, took notes, didn't interrupt. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. He's going to say you abandoned the marriage, she said, that you left voluntarily. I didn't leave, I replied. I was evicted. She smiled faintly. Good. We'll use that. By noon, papers were filed, accounts documented, locks photographed. By 12:47, Daniel texted, "Why is a lawyer contacting me?" I didn't respond. At 1:30 p.m., I went back to the house with an escort. The locksmith didn't look at Daniel, just at the paperwork. The door opened. The smell hit me first. Not perfume, not sex, disruption. Like a room rearranged by someone who didn't know its language. My things were everywhere and nowhere. Drawers disturbed, closet shifted. Daniel stood in the living room, arms crossed, trying to look indignant instead of afraid. You can't just barge in, he said. I can, I replied. I live here. You lived here? I turned to him. Say that again, I said softly. He didn't. I walked past him and into the bedroom. The bed was made wrong. That detail almost broke me. I opened my dresser. Half my clothes were gone. Folded, removed, curated. What did you do with my things? I asked. I packed some of them, he said. I thought it would be easier. For who? For you. I laughed. Once. No humor in it. You changed the locks, I said, turning to face him. You moved her in. You touched my belongings. And you think you're still negotiating. He looked at me then. Really looked. You're not crying, he said. No. You're not begging. No. You're not even angry. I am, I replied, just not in a way that benefits you. That was when his voice cracked. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. I stepped closer, lowered my voice. Nothing ever does, I said. That's why character matters. I packed only what I needed, not because I was defeated, because I was precise. At the door, I turned back. One last thing, I said. He looked hopeful. You changed the locks for her, I continued. You did it fast, professionally. Clean. Yes, he said cautiously. I want you to remember that moment, I said, because that's the one you don't get to rewrite. Then I left. 20 minutes. That's all it took to reveal who he really was. And I was just getting started. People think the aftermath is loud. It isn't. It's quiet in a way that makes your ears ring. I moved into a short-term apartment 2 days later. Neutral walls, cheap furniture, no shared history baked into the corners. I chose it because nothing in it could accuse me of memory. The first night, I slept on top of the covers. Not from fear, from instinct. My body hadn't learned yet that it no longer needed to stay alert. Daniel called every day at first. Morning, evening, sometimes both. His messages shifted tone like a man flipping through strategies. I miss you. We need counseling. You're making this ugly. You're throwing away 12 years. He never once said I'm sorry, not in a way that stood on its own. On the fourth day, I blocked his number. That's when he escalated. He showed up at my work. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked, face tight. "There's a man here," she said. "He says he's your husband." "Ex-husband," my mind corrected automatically. "I'll handle it," I said. I found him in the lobby, standing too straight, dressed too well, the man who wanted to look reasonable. "This is inappropriate," I said calmly. "I just want to talk." "You lost that privilege when you locked me out of my home." People were watching. He knew it. I knew it. "You don't have to do this in public," he said quietly. "That's interesting," I replied. "You didn't mind humiliating me in private." His jaw tightened. "She meant nothing," he said. "It was a mistake." "No," I said. "It was a decision. The lock was the receipt." He lowered his voice. "You're enjoying this?" I met his eyes. "No," I said. "I'm surviving it. There's a difference." Security approached. He noticed. "Emily," he said quickly, "if you go through with this, you're going to end up alone." There it was. The threat dressed as concern. I smiled. Small. Controlled. "I was alone while married to you," I replied. "This is an upgrade." I walked away without waiting for his response. That night, I unpacked fully. Not because I planned to stay, because I was done living out of boxes. I hung my clothes, placed my shoes neatly, set my toothbrush upright. Claiming space is a language. I was relearning it. The paperwork arrived the next week. Financial disclosures, statements, timelines. That's when I saw it. A withdrawal. Large, precise, dated 2 weeks before the locks. A contractor, a locksmith, an interior delivery service. For her. He hadn't just changed the locks, he'd prepared the house to receive someone else while I was still sleeping in our bed. That knowledge didn't hurt the way you'd expect. It clarified. I forwarded everything to my sister with one line. This wasn't an affair. It was a replacement. Her reply came fast. "Good. That changes how we proceed." Daniel's narrative began leaking soon after. Mutual friends stopped calling. Invitations evaporated. I let it happen. Anyone who believed him without asking me wasn't neutral. They were pre-aligned. One afternoon, I ran into her. Not planned, not cinematic. A grocery store, a produce aisle. She froze when she saw me. I recognized the sweater. My sweater. The one she'd worn like a trophy. "I didn't know," she said immediately. "About the locks, about how he did it." "That's interesting," I replied, "because you moved in the same day." Her eyes dropped. "He said you were unstable," she whispered. "That you left." I nodded. "That's the story he needs," I said. "You should ask yourself why." She swallowed. "He said you'd come back, that you always did." I leaned in slightly, not threatening, just close enough to matter. "I won't," I said, "but you might." Her face told me everything I needed to know. I paid for my groceries and walked out. That night, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the floor of my living room. No music, no television, just me. I thought about the 20 minutes, about how quickly a man will choose convenience over character when he thinks he won't be held accountable. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger burns fuel. I was past that stage. What I felt instead was resolve. The quiet, dangerous kind. Because I hadn't lost my life. I had recovered it. And the next change, the one that would matter most, was already in motion. Power doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives in increments, small confirmations that the ground beneath you is no longer borrowed. The first one came in the mail, a certified envelope, Daniel's handwriting, careful, controlled, the handwriting of a man trying to look reasonable for a future audience. Inside, a letter, not an apology, not a confession, a proposal. He wanted mediation. He wanted to avoid hostility. He wanted me to sign something that would make the locks an unfortunate misunderstanding instead of what they were. Evidence. I read it once. Then again. Then I folded it back into the envelope and placed it in a drawer labeled Receipts. I didn't respond. That silence bothered him more than anything I'd said. The second confirmation came from the house. Not from Daniel, from the door itself. The locksmith called my sister. "Just so you know," he said, "the locks were changed twice in 1 week. First time professionally, second time, rushed." Translation, she was already trying to secure herself against him. That made me smile. Not with pleasure, with recognition. Patterns don't break. They transfer. Daniel began slipping, missing deadlines, sending emotional emails he later tried to retract, calling my sister instead of his own attorney. Men like him are disciplined only as long as they feel in control. Once that's gone, they unravel loudly. He showed up again, this time at night. I didn't open the door. "I know you're in there," he said through the wood. "Your car's outside." "That's not an invitation," I replied. "We need to talk about the house. You need to talk to your lawyer. You're being vindictive." "No," I said. "I'm being precise." Silence. Then his voice dropped. "She's pregnant." There it was. The word men deploy like a weapon when they think it still works. I leaned my forehead against the door. Not from weakness, from balance. "Congratulations," I said. "I hope the locks were worth it." "You don't get it," he snapped. "This changes things." "It changes your things," I replied. "Mine already changed." "You're really going to walk away from everything we built?" I closed my eyes. "No," I said. "I walked away from what you destroyed." He left after that. Not dramatically, not quietly. Defeated men never know how to exit cleanly. I sat on the couch afterward and waited for the grief. It didn't come. What came instead was memory. Sharp, unfiltered. Moments I'd minimized. Apologies I'd accepted without explanation. Times I'd blamed myself for his impatience. I saw them clearly now, not as failures, as data. A week later, my sister called. "We're ready," she said. "For what?" I asked. "To make the lock the centerpiece." Daniel had underestimated something fundamental. He thought the affair was the betrayal. It wasn't. The lock was, because it transformed a private moral failure into a documented act of exclusion. Intentional, physical, measurable. "You didn't just cheat," my sister said. "You displaced." The hearing was set. Temporary orders, occupancy, assets. Daniel sat across from me at the long table, looking thinner. Older. She wasn't there. I noticed that too. His lawyer spoke first, carefully, softening edges. "Emotions were high," he said. "Mistakes were made." My sister stood. "Mistakes are accidental," she said. This was executed. She placed the photographs on the table, the lock, the invoice, the timestamp. Daniel didn't look at me. He looked at the table, like it might open and swallow him. The judge leaned forward. "You changed the locks while your wife was still living in the home?" "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "For another woman?" Silence. "Yes." The judge nodded once. That was it. Not anger, not lecture, just acknowledgement. Orders were issued. Exclusive use of the home, me. Immediate financial restrictions, him. No contact without counsel. We stood to leave. Daniel finally looked at me. "I never thought you'd do this," he said. I met his eyes. "I never thought you'd lock me out," I replied. Turns out we were both wrong. Outside, the air felt different. Lighter, sharper. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. And when something is finished properly, it doesn't echo. It closes. The next change wouldn't be legal. It would be personal. And it would be irreversible. Reclaiming a house is not the same as reclaiming a home. The first night back, I slept in the guest room. Not because I was afraid of the bedroom, because I refused to pretend nothing had happened there. The house was quiet in a new way. No tension humming through the walls, no footsteps I had learned to anticipate, no voice shaping the temperature of every room, just space. In the morning, I walked through it slowly, not nostalgically, clinically. I opened drawers, cabinets, closets. I touched what was left and noticed what wasn't. She had been careful, selective. She hadn't taken my things so much as she'd tried to replace them. Cheaper hangers, different pillows, a rearranged kitchen that suggested insecurity disguised as nesting. I bagged it all, not angrily, methodically. By noon, the trash bins were full. That was the first irreversible act I made entirely for myself. The second came later that week. I found the journal. It was hidden badly, tucked behind tax documents like guilt always is. I recognized his handwriting instantly. Neat, self-justifying, written like a man making a case to himself. I didn't want to read it. I did anyway. Not for pain, for finality. He wrote about me as if I were an obstacle course, a challenge, a temperament to be managed. He wrote about her as if she were oxygen. He wrote about the locks. She would never leave unless forced. This was the only way to move forward. I closed the journal. That sentence settled something permanently. I didn't scream. I didn't throw it. I placed it back where I found it. Then I called my sister. "We're amending," I said. "To include what?" she asked. "Intent," I replied. Daniel tried one last time to reframe himself. He sent an email, long, reflective, full of therapy language he'd learned too late. He wrote about fear, about mistakes, about growth. He wrote about becoming a father. He wrote about forgiveness like it was a transaction. I read it once, then I archived it. That's the thing about clarity. It makes explanations unnecessary. The personal change began quietly. I repainted the bedroom. Not white, not soothing. A deep, grounded color that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. I bought a new bed, new sheets, new mattress, no memory foam, no compromise. I threw out the wedding album, not ceremoniously, into a recycling bin, just paper. I didn't keep a single photograph, not because I was erasing history, because I was done negotiating with it. The neighbors started treating me differently. They'd heard. Of course they had. Some avoided me, some lingered too long, curious. One woman, married, careful, said quietly over the fence, "I don't know how you're being so calm." I looked at her. Really looked. "I'm not calm," I said. "I'm clear." That night, I slept in the bedroom, alone. No dread, no grief, no waiting for a door to open, just sleep. The final confirmation came unexpectedly. A knock. I opened the door to find her. Not pregnant glowing, not victorious, exhausted, defensive, already disappointed. "I just wanted to say," she began. "I didn't know he was capable of that." I didn't invite her in. "Yes," I said. "You did." She flinched. "You knew he had a wife," I continued. "You knew he changed the locks. You stayed." "He said you were cruel," she whispered. I nodded. "That's the word men use when boundaries inconvenience them." She looked past me into the house. "He doesn't talk about you the way he used to," she said. I smiled then. Truly. "That's because I'm not his mirror anymore." She left shortly after. I locked the door behind her. The sound was different now. Not exclusion, ownership. I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the kitchen, barefoot, steady. This wasn't revenge. This was alignment. And once you align with yourself, everything that doesn't belong falls away, with or without permission. People assume recovery looks like softness, candles, therapy language, gentle music, and mornings that glow. That's not what it looked like for me. It looked like structure. I rebuilt my days the way engineers rebuild bridges, load-bearing first. I woke up at the same time every morning. I ate real food. I exercised without trying to punish myself. I worked longer hours than I needed to, not to distract myself, but to remind myself that I still produced value without being witnessed. Daniel tried to interrupt that. He sent updates through lawyers, through mutual acquaintances who just wanted to check in, through one particularly foolish cousin who thought reconciliation was always noble. I shut it all down. No commentary, no emotional response, just procedure. That's what unnerves people the most. Not rage, not tears, procedure. 3 weeks after the hearing, the house felt like mine, not because his things were gone, because my body no longer braced when the doorbell rang. I hosted my first dinner there on a Thursday. 6 people, good wine, food that took time, no performance. At one point, someone asked carefully, "How are you really doing?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm intact," I said. They nodded. They understood more than they expected to. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat alone at the table and felt something unfamiliar. Pride, not loud, not defiant, quiet and earned. The next shift came from an unexpected place. Work. A project I'd been passed over for years ago, because it required travel, flexibility, visibility, came back across my desk. "You're the best person for it," my director said. "If you want it." I remembered how Daniel used to sigh when I traveled, how he framed my ambition as inconvenience. "I want it," I said immediately. The schedule was demanding, the exposure high, the risk real. I took it anyway. That decision changed more than my calendar. I started flying again, staying in cities where no one knew my history, where I wasn't someone's wife or cautionary tale, just a woman with a purpose and a hotel key. In one of those cities, late one night, I stood in a bathroom mirror and noticed something else had shifted. My face. Not happier, sharper, like someone who had stopped apologizing to herself. Daniel didn't like that. He sent another message, this one carefully phrased, strategic. He wanted to revisit terms. He felt the settlement was imbalanced. That made me laugh. Balance is what people ask for when they realize leverage has changed. My sister handled it. Short reply, firm language. No. After that, the silence stretched. Longer this time. That's when I knew he'd finally run out of angles. The last update came months later. Indirect. Secondhand. The baby wasn't his. I didn't react. Not because I was numb, because his consequences were no longer my education. That night I went home, poured a glass of wine, and stood by the window. I thought about the locks again, about how one decision, made quickly, selfishly, had detonated his entire narrative. I didn't feel grateful. I felt resolved. Because I finally understood something most people never do. Betrayal doesn't ruin you. It reveals you. And what it revealed in me wasn't broken. It was finished waiting. The next part of my life wasn't about healing. It was about expansion. And I intended to take up space. Expansion isn't loud either. It's deliberate. It's the moment you stop explaining yourself to rooms that never deserved access. I stopped answering questions about Daniel altogether. Not because it hurt, because it bored me. His name no longer triggered emotion. It triggered context. Like a footnote you don't reread. People noticed. When a woman stops performing her pain, it unsettles the audience. I traveled more, worked harder, chose differently. I stopped buying things that were meant to be admired and started buying things that worked. Shoes that could carry me through airports. Furniture chosen for comfort, not compromise. A car I picked without asking anyone's opinion. That last one mattered more than I expected. Daniel had always framed my independence as indulgence. Do you really need that? Isn't that excessive? Let's talk about it first. No one asked me those questions anymore. The house changed with me. Not decor, energy. I took down the last shared photograph. Not of us, but of a place we'd visited together. It didn't hurt. It just didn't belong. That's how you know something is over. It stops asking to be remembered. The first time I dated someone new, I knew immediately it wouldn't last. Not because he was unkind, because he was impressed. That's not attraction. That's hierarchy trying to reassert itself. I ended it politely, quickly. I wasn't interested in being anyone's lesson or reward. I wanted parity, or solitude. Solitude, it turned out, was excellent. I read more, thought more clearly, ate dinner when I was hungry instead of when someone else was ready. I slept diagonally across the bed. That freedom felt radical at first. Then it felt normal. One evening, months later, I found myself standing in the doorway of the house, keys in hand, and realized something startling. I no longer thought of it as the house he locked me out of. It was just my home. That's when the final message came. Not from Daniel, from myself. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing a contract for an opportunity that would move me overseas for a year. A challenge, a risk, a door that would have once required negotiation. I didn't hesitate. I signed. That night, I stood in the quiet and let the weight of the last year settle. The lock, the 20 minutes, the unraveling. All of it had led here, not to revenge, not to triumph, but to agency. Daniel had tried to reduce me to something manageable. Instead, he had made me undeniable. I turned off the lights and went upstairs. Tomorrow, I would begin packing, not to escape, to expand. And this time, no one would be holding the keys but me. Leaving doesn't always look like running. Sometimes it looks like choosing yourself without ceremony. I didn't announce the move. I didn't explain it to people who had only recently learned how to pronounce my pain. I sold what I didn't need, packed what mattered, and let the rest go without apology. The house sold faster than expected. Clean break, clean numbers. Daniel didn't try to stop it. He couldn't. That chapter had closed legally and spiritually. What surprised me wasn't his silence. It was how little space it took up in my mind. I noticed that one morning while drinking coffee alone. I hadn't thought of him in days. Not as a threat. Not as a lesson. Not at all. That's the real ending most people never talk about. Not forgiveness, not closure, irrelevance. The new city was unfamiliar in the right ways. Different light, different rhythms, no shared history waiting to ambush me at street corners. I rented a small apartment with high ceilings and unapologetic windows. The kind of place that didn't try to be cozy. The kind that expected you to bring your own substance. I liked that. Work absorbed me quickly. Demanding, exacting, honest. No one there knew what it had cost me to arrive. And that anonymity felt earned. One evening, after a long day, I found myself standing in front of a door I hadn't noticed before. A locksmith's shop. I don't know why I stopped. Inside, the air smelled like metal and oil. Keys hung on the walls like artifacts. Thousands of them. All different. All designed to open something specific. The man behind the counter asked if he could help me. "I'm just looking," I said. That was true. I thought about the lock again. About how such a small object had carried so much consequence. How it had been used to exclude. And how I had learned to include myself anyway. I bought a keychain. Simple, heavy, solid. When I got home, I hung it by the door. That night, lying in bed, I felt something else settle into place. Not triumph, not bitterness, authority. I had learned how quickly comfort can turn into containment, how love can be used as leverage, how access should never be mistaken for entitlement. And most importantly, I had learned this. A woman who survives deliberate cruelty without becoming cruel herself is not weak. She is disciplined. The next morning, I woke early, opened the windows, let the city in. Somewhere, Daniel was living inside the consequences of his choices. I wasn't. I was busy building a life that no longer needed to be defended. There would be one more change, not dramatic, not public, but permanent. And when it arrived, it would feel less like transformation and more like recognition. The last change didn't announce itself. It didn't arrive with a suitcase or a signature or a dramatic phone call in the night. It arrived as a question. I was standing in line for coffee on an ordinary morning, dressed for work, thinking about nothing in particular, when the barista asked casually, "Is that your name on the card?" I looked down. I'd been using my married name out of habit, not attachment. Habit is harder to kill. "Yes," I said automatically. Then I paused. "No," I corrected. "It isn't anymore." The barista smiled politely, already moving on, unaware that something had just shifted at the foundation. I walked out with my coffee and stood on the sidewalk longer than necessary, watching people pass. No one knew. No one needed to. I realized then that I had been carrying his name like a scar that no longer hurt, but still marked me as having belonged to something that failed. I didn't feel anger toward it. I felt finished. That afternoon, I made an appointment. Simple. Administrative. The clerk asked if I was sure. "Yes," I said. "I'm very sure." Forms were signed, boxes checked, a name released back into the wild where it belonged. I chose my original name, not as an act of reclamation, as an act of alignment. When the confirmation arrived weeks later, I held it in my hands and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because I'd escaped him, because I no longer carried evidence of him on my tongue. I updated my passport, my accounts, my email signature. Each change was small, each one final. No announcement, no ceremony, just accuracy. One night, while unpacking groceries, I dropped my keys. They hit the floor with a familiar weight. I picked them up and noticed something I hadn't before. There was no house key attached anymore, only the apartment, only the present. I stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet. I thought about the woman I'd been on that porch, holding a grocery bag, staring at a lock that told her everything she needed to know. She had been stunned, but she had not been helpless. She had acted. That matters. Most people don't fall apart when betrayed. They freeze. I hadn't frozen. I'd moved. And because of that, the end hadn't ruined me. It had refined me. I turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow would be full, demanding, mine. The story didn't need another confrontation, another reveal, another victory. It had already said what it needed to say. The lock had changed everything, but it hadn't closed me out of my life. It had shown me exactly where the door was, and I had walked through it, without looking back. Endings don't arrive with music. They arrive with stillness. By the time I realized this was the end of the story, nothing dramatic was happening. No confrontation, no apology, no final message that needed to be answered or archived. Just a morning. I woke early, as I always did now. The city was quiet in that brief, honest hour before it decided what it wanted from you. I made coffee, opened the window, let the air in without checking the weather first. That mattered. I thought briefly about the woman I had been before the lock, the one who still believed love was proven through endurance, the one who mistook accommodation for loyalty, the one who thought being chosen was the same as being valued. I didn't judge her. She did the best she could with the information she had. But she is not the woman standing here now. The woman standing here does not wait for explanations. She does not ask permission to leave rooms that diminish her. She does not confuse access with intimacy or longevity with truth. She understands something very simple and very sharp. If someone is willing to remove you from your own life to make space for their convenience, they have already forfeited the right to be remembered kindly. Daniel never asked for forgiveness in the way it mattered. Not because he couldn't, because that would have required admitting that the lock wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. I didn't need that admission anymore. That's the final shift people rarely talk about. The moment you stop needing the other person to understand what they did. I put on my coat, picked up my keys. The weight felt familiar, reassuring. At the door, I paused, not out of sentiment, but awareness. This life was quiet, ordered, earned. I locked the door behind me and walked down the stairs without thinking about who might be waiting on the other side. No one was. And that was the point. Somewhere, a man still tells a story where he was misunderstood, where things got out of hand, where a woman overreacted. I don't correct that story. I don't participate in it. I have my own. It begins with a lock turning in a door that was never meant to be closed to me. And it ends here, with a woman who knows without doubt that being chosen is irrelevant. What matters is choosing yourself before someone decides you are optional.